Should we see what the Shadow Culture Secretary, Thangam Debbonaire, makes of all of this? She joins us now. Really good to see you this morning. Thanks for your time. Look, a quick word on this strike action. Look, the government's got a point, haven't they, or the Department for Transport, when they say, look, there's a very nice offer on the table for ASLEF, saying, 65 grand for a 35-hour, 4-day working week.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, that's for the union and the government to negotiate, and I'd like to see them do that as soon as possible, because obviously strikes help none of us, the working people who want to get to work, people who want to get to visit family and friends. It's really important that these strikes are settled as soon as possible, and I really hope that the government and the unions can negotiate that and a fair settlement as soon as they can.
How do you feel things went at COP28?
Well, I think it was really interesting, the contrast between Rishi Sunak, who basically seemed to arrive, turn around 3 times and go back again, and last year had to be dragged kicking and screaming, and Keir Starmer, who really is setting out his stall on the world stage, showing that he is a global leader, meeting with prime ministers from countries from Iceland to Barbados to discuss our Clean Power Alliance, which is so necessary. If we're going to get to net zero by 2030, and we want to get to net zero energy by 2030, that's one of Labour's missions, we have to cooperate, we have to share information, we have to collaborate with other countries, because this is too important a race to slow down on. We need this because if we want to get people's bills down for good, and of course we do, if we want to have good energy security so we're not at the mercy of tyrants like Putin, and if we want to save the planet and create those great new jobs of the future, it will take cooperation. Keir Starmer has shown this week that he is taking his place on the world stage, that he wants brand Britain to be boosted around the world, and that that's in the interest of lower bills, good jobs, and energy security, and of course saving the planet.
Yeah, all right. It's that part of the reason why some of the net zero stuff was the targets weren't moved, but priorities were shifted by the Prime Minister, was because of the financial impact it was going to have on people here in the UK. Now, if you're talking net zero energy by 2030, it might have benefits after 2030, perhaps. However, it's going to cost us now, isn't it?
Well, the thing is that the cheapest form of energy generation that we have is onshore wind. And under the Tories over the last 13 years, that has slowed virtually to a halt. That actually means lower bills for good for people. And at this time of a cost of living crisis, goodness me, couldn't people do with knowing that that's what's coming? Now, we know that the planning process has slowed down applications to get those wind farms up and running. We want to change that. We want to accelerate it. And that's really important if people want to have lower bills, which I think everybody does, but also save the planet. It's in our long-term and our short-term financial interests. And with Rachel Reeves as our Chancellor, we will always stick to our strict fiscal rules of not borrowing for day-to-day spending and only borrowing for capital investment when that's in our long-term financial and other interests. And that's what this is about. We have to get to net zero so that people's bills come down for good and that we save the planet.
You're Shadow Culture Secretary. What would you do with the Elgin marbles?
Well, I mean, we think in the Labour Party, we think that it's important that we actually talk to our allies. And this week, Keir Starmer met with the Prime Minister of Greece and discussed this amongst many other things. Again, in stark contrast to Rishi Sunak, we think that the British Museum and the Greek authorities are more than capable of coming up with a good agreement. That is in process. I will be meeting with the British Museum soon in order to discuss their plans and proposals. We think it's important that we trust museums and our allies and actually work constructively with them. It was quite astonishing, frankly, this week to see Rishi Sunak effectively just sort of sulkily cancel a meeting at the last minute with the Prime Minister of one of our closest allies. That's not a way to behave on the world stage. And I'm very glad that Keir Starmer chose instead to meet with him and discuss matters from climate change and terrorism and security and, of course, the Elgin marbles. I think that showed what sort of a leader Keir is.
Does the Labour Party agree with deplatforming people it doesn't agree with politically?
We think that free speech is really, really important. And of course, we do have laws in order to prevent the incitement to racial hatred and so on. But actually, I think one of the best ways of debating difficult topics is to discuss them respectfully with people with whom you disagree. If you only ever talk to people you agree with, you don't get very far.
All right, then what would you say to your colleague, Labour MP Nadia Whittome, who's quoted in the Mirror today saying Nigel Farage is a deeply poisonous influence who should be denied a platform?
Well, I mean, Nigel Farage is, of course, a GBNews presenter, and I'm not sure if you guys have had your invites to be on I'm a Celebrity. I have to say I don't fancy it much, but it is up to the viewers. It's up to ITV to choose who goes on the programme, and it's up to the viewers to decide who gets those Bush Tucker trials and who gets voted off. Yeah,
but I mean, look, if you bump into Nadia Whittome in Westminster, what are you going to say to her? Because actually coming out with this sort of narrative in terms of critical thinking for the voting public of the UK, she's saying exactly the wrong thing, isn't she?
Well, Nadia is a colleague and a really hard-working MP and representative of Nottingham. And as I said, we debate with people we don't agree as well as with people we do agree. I think really it is a matter for the viewers of I'm a Celebrity to decide who's on there and who's voted off. I mean, it's making entertainment for lots of people who are enjoying it. And, I think it's important that we share our views and we debate them, and that's what's taking place.
But she's suggesting that he be booted off the programme simply because of who he is and his political views. Not to do with anything to do with his performance on the programme or anything like that, or whether he's entertaining or not. Simply because of who he is, she feels he should be deplatformed.
I think that it's obviously it's up to the programme makers who's on the programme, and it's up to the viewers who gets booted off. Other people are entitled to have a different view. That's fine. It's a democracy. But what matters here is, this is a piece of entertainment. And if people don't like having Nigel Farage on the show, then they'll vote him off. And they might decide that they want to keep him on just because it's entertaining to see what they can get him to eat.
She's a Labour MP. As you said, she's a colleague, but she's a Labour MP. And she is saying he should be booted off a programme because he shouldn't be allowed that sort of publicity. And that's what she's calling for. I mean, you're saying it's up to ITV and it's up to the audience and their vote. But it's not. She's saying simply because of who he is, he should be off.
Well, Nadia's entitled to her view, but I think I'm speaking factually here when I say that it's actually up to the viewers to decide what they want to do with Nigel Farage, and whether or not he's booted off or allowed to stay on and eat more horrible things.
OK. Thangam Debbonaire, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you too. Thank you both.
Appreciate that.